I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this. My name is Mark, and I've been married to Lisa for nearly 8 years. We met in college where sparks flew at a mutual friend's party. She was the life of the party with a contagious laugh that filled the room. I fell hard for her, and after dating for a couple of years, we tied the knot, excited about our future together. But lately, things had begun to feel off. It started with little things: her late nights at work, the sudden interest in her fitness regimen, and her newfound obsession with her phone. I shrugged it off as her trying to balance her job in marketing with our life together. I had my own work stress to deal with as I was managing a small software company. We both had our lives, but we always prioritized our time together. Or so I thought. Things took a turn when our house was broken into last month. Nothing of great value was stolen, just some old electronics and a few personal items. But it shook us up. We decided to invest in a security system. I figured we could hire a detective to look into the incident as well. That's when I met Detective Ryan. He was professional, polite, and seemed genuinely interested in helping us. He came to the house a few times to gather information and evaluate our security measures. The investigation went cold pretty quickly. Ryan was friendly, but I noticed Lisa's demeanor changed whenever he was around. She'd laugh a little too long at his jokes, touch his shoulder when she handed him papers, and I brushed it off as her being friendly. But somewhere in the back of my mind there were warnings flashing. I didn't want to believe that my wife could ever cheat on me. Yet the feeling nagged at me. One evening, while reviewing the security footage from our new cameras, something I thought would help keep our home safe, I noticed something strange. I wasn't looking for anything suspicious. I was just trying to make sure the camera angles were set correctly. But there it was, in the footage from the night of our break-in. Lisa was in the living room, but it wasn't just her. Ryan was there too. They were laughing, leaning in close to each other, and it looked far too intimate for a professional relationship. I felt my heart drop into my stomach. My mind raced back to every little sign I had ignored. The late-night texts, the whispered conversations that stopped when I walked into the room. I replayed that footage over and over, the reality sinking in that the man I had trusted to help us was the one my wife was cheating with. The betrayal was almost suffocating. The confrontation was inevitable. I waited until she got home late that night, my heart pounding. "We need to talk," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I watched as the color drained from her face, and I knew she knew. I confronted her with the video evidence, and her initial shock quickly turned into anger. "How could you go through my things?" she snapped. "This is ridiculous, Mark. Ridiculous. You think it's ridiculous that I found you with him. You're cheating on me, Lisa." I shot back, the hurt flooding through my words. She tried to deny it, claiming they were just friends, that I was being paranoid, but I could see through her lies. "Mark, you have to believe me. I didn't mean for it to happen. Ryan is just what? A friend." I interrupted, unable to keep my voice down. It struck me how easily she spun her web of deceit. "You were laughing and flirting with him while I thought we were dealing with a break-in. Do you know how messed up that is?" She had no real explanation, just a handful of excuses that made me feel even worse. I was angry, but beneath that I was devastated. The woman I loved had betrayed me in the worst possible way. I felt like a fool, finding out like this, and all I could do was wonder how I had missed the signs. For days after the confrontation, I was a storm of emotions. I went from anger to sadness, from disbelief to acceptance. I didn't know how to process any of it, and sleep became impossible as I lay in the dark, replaying memories of our happy moments like a broken record, now tainted by this betrayal. The trust we built felt shattered, and I fought the urge to lash out or beg for answers that I knew would only cut me deeper. As I tried to come to terms with this reality, I was faced with a decision: what to do next. I loved her, but could I ever look at her the same way again? Could I trust her? I knew I had to figure this out, and fast, before the emotional turmoil consumed me completely. The days after the confrontation were a blur of emotional chaos. Lisa had moved into the spare room, and the silence between us was deafening. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of betrayal crushing my chest. I was supposed to be the one who kept us safe, the one who'd protect her, yet here I was, the victim of an affair that had turned my life upside down. She cried, and at times I could see the guilt in her eyes, but I found it hard to muster any sympathy. How could I? I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, teetering between anger and devastation. One moment I wanted to scream and demand answers, while in the next I felt a deep, aching sadness for what we once had. Each day felt like a battle, and I turned to work to distract myself. I threw myself into my projects, trying to keep my mind occupied. My coworkers noticed my distraction, but I brushed off their concerns, claiming I was just busy. I couldn't let them see how much I was falling apart inside. But the truth was, I was unraveling. I began to keep tabs on Lisa's movements. It was unhealthy, I knew that, but I couldn't help myself. I started tracking her phone when she was out, wondering if she was meeting up with Ryan again. It was a slippery slope into paranoia, but I felt powerless to stop it. I had to know if she was still seeing him. One evening, after another long day of work, I came home to find her on the couch, glued to her phone. My heart raced as I approached her. "Are you going out again tonight?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "What's it to you?" She shot back, not even looking up. Her dismissive tone ignited a spark of anger in me. "I just want to know who you're meeting," I said, my fists clenching at my sides. She rolled her eyes. "You're not my keeper, Mark. I can do what I want." The back and forth continued, and I felt like I was losing control. Every defensive remark she made felt like a knife twisting in my gut. She was being so unrepentant, and I couldn't help but feel like a fool for trying to salvage anything. I didn't want to believe she had become so callous, but there I was, grappling with the reality of her betrayal. Then, one fateful afternoon, I got a call from Detective Ryan. It was unexpected, and I answered hesitantly. "Mark, I found something regarding your case," he said, his tone serious. My heart raced. Maybe he had new leads about the break-in. "Can we meet?" We agreed to meet at a cafe near my office. I arrived early, my stomach a knot of anxiety. I felt more like a puppet on strings, waiting to hear what this man had to say. When Ryan arrived, he shook my hand, and I noticed a slight nervousness in his demeanor. I sat straight up, not wanting to show any weakness. "Thanks for meeting me," he said, taking a seat across from me. "I hope you have good news," I replied, trying not to sound too desperate. "It's about your case, but I also need to talk to you about Lisa," he said, his eyes avoiding mine. The mention of her name sent a jolt through me. "What about her?" I asked, my voice dropping to a whisper. Ryan glanced around, and I could see the conflict in his eyes. "I need to be honest with you. I know this is hard to hear, but I didn't just come here to discuss the break-in." My heart pounded as I braced myself for what he was about to say. "What's going on?" He took a deep breath, finally meeting my gaze. "I've been with Lisa. I didn't realize at first that she was married, and I should have known better. I didn't want to believe she'd betray you, but we got close while we were working together." The words hit me like a freight train, and I felt the blood drain from my face. "You were sleeping with my wife. You're the one she cheated on me with." He nodded, looking remorseful. "I'm truly sorry, Mark. I didn't think it would go that far. I was just doing my job, and then things escalated." I could feel the anger boiling inside me. "So you're telling me you were investigating a break-in, but you were also having sex with my wife? What kind of sick joke is this?" He tried to explain himself, but my mind was racing. The betrayal was twofold now: my wife and the man I trusted to help me. I felt like the walls were closing in, suffocating me with the weight of their deceit. I got up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I can't do this," I said, cutting him off. "This whole situation is beyond messed up. You both deserve each other." I stormed out of the cafe, my heart pounding in my chest. The betrayal felt like a dark cloud hovering over me, and it was suffocating. I was filled with rage, and I didn't know how to channel it. I couldn't go home, not yet. I didn't want to face Lisa. I needed time to think, to breathe. For the rest of that day, I wandered aimlessly, my thoughts racing. I wanted revenge, but I didn't want to become someone I was. I reflected on my relationship with Lisa, the dreams we had built together, and how they had crumbled in a matter of weeks. Would I really be able to move past this? Could I ever forgive her? As day turned into night, I knew I needed to confront her again, but this time I wouldn't go in blind. I would have a plan and I would make her pay for what she had done. That night, I sat in the dim light of my living room, replaying the events of the day. The cafe confrontation with Ryan was still fresh in my mind. The anger coursed through my veins like a relentless current. I felt like I had been caught in a whirlwind, and now I was left to pick up the pieces of a shattered marriage. Lisa was still in the spare room, and I could hear her moving around, likely texting Ryan or doing whatever it was that cheaters did when they thought no one was watching. I felt the urge to confront her right then and there, to rip off the facade she had built, but I decided to wait. If I was going to do this, I needed to be strategic. The next morning, I woke up with a newfound sense of determination. I had spent the night thinking about my options, and I was done being the victim. I wanted her to know that I wasn't going to let her walk all over me. I needed to flip the script. I decided to gather evidence. I went through our shared computer and started digging into her emails and social media accounts. I felt like a detective myself, but this time I wasn't trying to uncover a break-in. I was hunting for the truth about her betrayal. I found a string of messages between her and Ryan, filled with flirtations and inside jokes that cut deep. I felt bile rise in my throat as I read through them, but I kept going, telling myself that I needed this information for what was to come. As I pieced together the timeline of their affair, my heart raced. They had been meeting up during work hours, sneaking around like the worst kind of criminals. I found explicit messages that described their encounters in detail, and I gripped the edge of the desk, feeling rage boil inside me anew. The lies had been so insidious, and I was angry at both of them for how easily they had crafted this secret life. Once I had gathered enough evidence, I decided to confront Lisa again. This time, I would come prepared, armed with the knowledge of her deceit. I waited until she returned home from work, feeling the tension build in my chest as I rehearsed what I would say. I needed her to see who she truly was, to understand the gravity of her actions. When she stepped through the door, I could see the exhaustion etched on her face. She smiled at me, but there was a nervousness in her eyes that I didn't miss. "Hey, you," she said, trying to keep her tone light. "Hey, Lisa," I replied, cutting straight to the heart of the matter. "We need to talk." Her expression shifted, the smile fading as she mustered up a defensive posture. "About what?" I pulled out my phone, ready to show her the evidence. "About your affair with Ryan. I found the messages, Lisa. You can't deny it any longer." Her face paled as I revealed the screenshots. "Mark, wait, it's not what you think." She stammered, but the panic in her eyes told me everything I needed to know. "No, you mean the part where you call him my favorite detective and talk about how you can't wait to see him again, or how much you enjoy hiding things from me." I shot back, feeling the anger rise in my throat. "Do you really think I'd believe your excuses anymore?" She tried to play the victim, spinning a story about how it was just a fling, how she was confused and needed to find herself. "I didn't mean for it to happen. It was a mistake, Mark. Ryan is just, he's different." "Different?" I snapped. "Different how? Because he was willing to give you attention while you were betraying your husband. You think I would ever want to hear you say that?" Tears streamed down her cheeks, and for a brief moment I felt a flicker of sympathy. But it quickly died out as I remembered the pain she had caused me. "You destroyed our trust, Lisa. You tore apart the very foundation of our marriage. You think just saying you're sorry will fix this?" "I can change. I'll do anything," she pleaded. "Please just give me another chance." Her desperation was palpable, but I was done with the emotional manipulation. I took a deep breath to calm myself, but it did little to quell the storm of emotions inside. "You expect me to just forgive you and move on? I can't pretend this didn't happen, Lisa. You've shattered everything." We stood there, the space between us heavy with tension. I could see her trying to process the reality of it all, the gravity of her betrayal crashing down on her. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of seeing me broken, but I also felt an overwhelming sorrow for the life we had built. "I don't know what I'll do yet," I said finally, my voice low. "But I can't be in this marriage right now. You need to really think about what you've done and what this means for us." I turned to leave the room, feeling as if I was ripping off a bandage that had kept the wound from festering. The pain was raw and fresh, but I needed to distance myself from her. The emotional journey had turned into a battle, and I was determined to come out of this stronger. I spent the night at a friend's place, letting the anger and sadness wash over me like a relentless tide. I realized that revenge was not the answer, at least not in the way I initially thought. I didn't want to become someone driven by spite. Instead, I wanted to reclaim my life, to find a way to heal from this betrayal. I needed to focus on myself, to figure out what I wanted moving forward. The next few days passed in a haze. I focused on work and avoided interactions with Lisa as much as possible. I felt her attempts to reach out, but I didn't respond. I needed the space to think clearly and to process everything. In a way, I began to feel a sense of liberation from the chaos of our marriage. It was terrifying, but it also opened the door for new possibilities. In an unexpected twist, a friend from work suggested I consult a therapist. It was a suggestion I had never really considered, but as I reflected on the idea, it began to sound appealing. I needed someone to help me navigate the emotional turmoil, to help me rebuild my sense of self. I scheduled an appointment, not entirely sure what to expect, but hopeful that I could find clarity in this mess. As I sat in the waiting room for my first therapy session, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. Maybe this was the beginning of a journey toward healing, a chance to reclaim my narrative. I was ready to take the next steps, whatever they might be. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was determined to find my way back to a life I could be proud of, with or without Lisa. The therapy sessions turned out to be a lifeline in the midst of the chaos that had become my life. I wasn't sure what to expect when I first walked into the therapist's office. The walls were painted a calming teal, and the warm lighting created an inviting atmosphere. Dr. Harlow was a steady presence, her demeanor calm and inviting. I appreciated that she didn't push too hard at first. Instead, she let me talk at my own pace. I slowly unraveled the events that had led me to her office, the break-in, the betrayal, and the emotional roller coaster that followed. I found myself recounting my feelings of disbelief, anger, and sadness, and each session felt like a weight being lifted off my shoulders. I learned to articulate my feelings in a way I had never done before. It was cathartic. One of the most impactful moments came during the third session when Dr. Harlow asked me to consider what I truly wanted for my future. "You've gone through a significant betrayal, Mark, but what do you see for yourself moving forward?" she asked. I sat in silence for a moment, reflecting. Honestly, I hadn't thought that far ahead. "I guess I want to feel whole again," I replied finally. "I want to find happiness, whether that's alone or with someone else, but right now I just feel lost." Finding clarity can take time, especially after such a painful experience, she said. It's important to allow yourself to grieve the loss of the life you thought you had. Acknowledge the pain, but also recognize that you have the power to redefine your path. Her words resonated deeply. I realized I had been so focused on the betrayal that I hadn't stopped to think about what I wanted from my life moving forward. I had spent years trying to make my marriage work, and while I didn't want to dismiss the good times we had, I also couldn't ignore how Lisa had destroyed our trust. With each session, I began to regain a sense of agency over my life. I started to focus on self-care, hitting the gym regularly, eating better, and even picking up hobbies I had neglected, like painting and photography. I found myself rediscovering the things that brought me joy, the things I had set aside in my dedication to my marriage. Meanwhile, things at home with Lisa remained tense. I had moved into the spare room, and while we shared a roof, it felt more like we were living under the same sky but in different worlds. I avoided conversations about our relationship whenever possible. I wasn't ready to discuss forgiveness or reconciliation, not yet. Then came the day I received a text from Lisa while I was at work. She wanted to meet. My heart sank. I felt a wave of anxiety wash over me. The last thing I wanted was to have another confrontation, but I knew I couldn't avoid it forever. I agreed to meet her at a local cafe, the same place where I had confronted Ryan. When I arrived, Lisa was already sitting at a table, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee. She looked nervous, and for the first time since the affair came to light, I found myself feeling a flicker of compassion for her. She had always been good at putting on a facade, but today she seemed more vulnerable, the weight of her guilt visible in her eyes. "Hey," she greeted me softly as I sat down, her voice barely above a whisper. "Hey," I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she said, her gaze fixed on the table, "and I want to be honest with you about everything." I braced myself, unsure of what honesty meant coming from her. I had heard so many lies already. "Go on," I said, keeping my expression guarded. "I know I messed up. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I want you to know that I'm truly sorry for what I did. It was selfish and stupid," she admitted, her voice shaking slightly. "I was caught up in something I didn't fully understand, and I hurt you in a way I never wanted to." I looked at her, trying to gauge the sincerity in her words. "And what's changed?" I asked. "What makes you think this time is different?" "I've been in therapy too," she said, surprising me. "I realized that I wasn't just cheating on you, I was running away from my own issues. I thought I could fill the void with excitement and attention from someone else, but it only led to more pain. I've been working on myself, and I want to be better, not just for you but for me." I was taken aback. The idea that she was seeking help gave me pause. Could she really be sincere? "And what do you want from me?" I asked, my voice steady. "I want a chance to prove to you that I can change. I know I don't deserve it, but I want to rebuild your trust. I want to show you that I can be the partner you thought I was," she pleaded, her eyes glistening with tears. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. I had spent so long feeling hurt and betrayed, and while I didn't want to dismiss her efforts, I also wasn't ready to jump back into things. "Lisa, it's going to take a lot more than words to rebuild what you've broken. Trust isn't something that just comes back because you say you're sorry." "I know," she replied, nodding slowly. "I'm willing to do the work. I just need you to give me a chance to show you that I can be better." We sat in silence for a few moments, both lost in our thoughts. I was torn between the desire to keep my heart guarded and the hope that maybe, just maybe, she was sincere in her desire to change. But the reality of our situation loomed over me like a dark cloud. I didn't know if I could ever fully trust her again. "I need time," I finally said. "I can't just jump back into this without knowing for sure. I need to see actions, not just words." Her expression fell, but there was understanding in her eyes. "I get it. Take all the time you need. I'll be here waiting." We left the cafe with a sense of ambiguity lingering between us. There was no resolution, but her willingness to confront her own issues and admit her wrongs felt like a step in the right direction. I realized that healing wouldn't be a linear process. It would be filled with ups and downs, twists and turns. As I continued my therapy sessions and focused on my own healing, I began to see a glimmer of clarity. I knew I couldn't rush forgiveness. It had to come in its own time. I also knew that I needed to prepare myself for whatever the future held, whether it involved Lisa or not. I had taken the first step toward reclaiming my life, and I was determined to see it through. The journey was just beginning, and I was ready to face it head on. As the days turned into weeks, the tension in our home gradually shifted. Lisa and I maintained a fragile truce, each of us tiptoeing around the lingering pain of betrayal while trying to navigate this new, uncertain territory. I continued my therapy sessions, which became a sanctuary for me, a place where I could explore my feelings without judgment. I was learning to articulate my pain, my anger, and, surprisingly, my hopes for the future. During one session, Dr. Harlow encouraged me to reflect on what I wanted from my life and what I needed from a partner moving forward. "It's essential to define your boundaries and establish what you're willing to accept and what you're not," she advised. "This is your opportunity to set the terms for your happiness." I took her words to heart. As much as I wanted to forgive Lisa, I also needed to protect myself. I began to write down my thoughts, lists of what I desired in a relationship and what I would absolutely not tolerate again. This exercise helped me see the bigger picture. It wasn't just about Lisa's actions, but about my own needs and desires. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, I came home to find Lisa in the kitchen. She was baking cookies, a nostalgic attempt to recreate our happier times. Smell wafted through the house, and for a moment I felt a pang of longing for the simplicity of our early days together. "Hey, I made your favorite," she said, her voice tentative as she looked up at me. "Chocolate chip." I forced a smile, trying to appreciate the gesture, but the memories came rushing back, both good and bad. "Thanks," I replied, feeling the weight of our history in the room. As the evening unfolded, we engaged in small talk, sharing stories about our day. I realized that beneath the surface of our strained relationship, there was still a flicker of familiarity. It was comforting in a way, but it also made me acutely aware of the void that had been left by her betrayal. After dinner, I knew it was time to have a more serious conversation. "Lisa, can we talk about what you said at the cafe the other day?" I asked, my heart racing. "Of course," she replied, her expression shifting to one of concern. "What's on your mind?" I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. "I know you've said you want to change, and I appreciate that you're working on yourself, but I need to know what that looks like for you. What are your intentions going forward?" Her eyes widened slightly, and I could see her processing the weight of my question. "I want to prove to you that I can be trustworthy again. I'm committed to going to therapy and being open and honest with you about everything. I want us to rebuild our relationship, but I understand it's not going to happen overnight." I nodded, feeling a mixture of hope and skepticism. "I need you to understand that rebuilding trust is a process for me. I have to see consistent actions that match your words. I'm willing to work on this, but I need boundaries in place. I need to know that you're not just going to slip back into old habits." "I promise, Mark," she said, her voice earnest. "I want to be better. I want to show you that I can be the partner you deserve." It was a small step forward, but I felt a flicker of hope. We agreed to set some boundaries. She would keep me updated on her therapy progress, and I would communicate my feelings more openly. I also made it clear that I needed space at times to process my emotions without feeling pressured to respond immediately. As the weeks passed, I began to notice changes in Lisa. She was more open about her therapy sessions, sharing insights and breakthroughs with me. I appreciated her vulnerability, but I also remained cautious. There were days when I felt overwhelmed by the weight of our situation, and I would retreat into the sanctuary of my own thoughts. One night, as I lay in bed, I turned to my journal and began to write. I poured my heart onto the pages, reflecting on the journey I had taken since discovering Lisa's betrayal. I wrote about my pain, my anger, and the flickers of hope that had emerged from the darkness. I also wrote about my growing understanding of what I needed to heal. Then, an unexpected thought crossed my mind. What if I started dating again? The idea was both thrilling and terrifying. I had spent so long focusing on Lisa and the heartbreak she caused that I hadn't considered the possibility of exploring new relationships. What would it mean to open myself up to someone new? The next day, I hesitantly shared this idea with Dr. Harlow. "It's a natural instinct to seek connection," she said, her voice calm and encouraging. "You're rediscovering who you are outside of your marriage. It's okay to explore that possibility as long as you're honest about where you stand." Her words resonated with me. Perhaps dating wasn't about moving on from Lisa, but rather about rediscovering my own identity. I could meet new people, forge new connections, and rediscover what I wanted from a partner without rushing into anything. As I navigated this newfound freedom, I began to explore online dating platforms, cautiously putting myself out there. It felt strange at first, like trying on clothes that didn't quite fit. My heart raced with every match, every conversation, and I felt both exhilarated and terrified. Weeks turned into months, and while I was still processing my feelings about Lisa, I began to embrace the idea of dating again. It wasn't about replacing her, it was about reclaiming my life. I went on a few casual dates, which were refreshing and exciting. Meeting new people reminded me of the joy of connection, even if it was still a little awkward. Through it all, Lisa continued to put in the work on herself. I could see genuine effort in her attempts to reconnect, but I still approached our relationship with caution. I didn't want to rush into anything too quickly, and I remained focused on my own healing. One evening, as we sat together sharing dinner, Lisa looked at me with a seriousness I hadn't seen in a while. "Mark, I want you to know that I'm proud of you for taking these steps. I see how you're growing and it inspires me to do better." Her words struck a chord within me. "Thank you," I replied, feeling a sense of warmth in my chest. "It's a process for both of us. I just hope we can find a way forward that feels healthy for both of us." "I believe we can," she said, her eyes glimmering with sincerity. In that moment I felt a shift. It was a small flicker of hope, a reminder that healing was possible, even in the wake of betrayal. Whether that meant rebuilding our relationship or redefining our paths apart, I knew we were both striving for growth. As the weeks unfolded, I continued to navigate this delicate balance between my past and my emerging future. I recognized that love and trust could be rebuilt, but it required honesty, effort, and a willingness to confront the uncomfortable truths that lay beneath the surface. I was beginning to grasp that, regardless of what happened between Lisa and me, I was capable of finding happiness on my own or with someone new. The journey was far from over, but I was determined to take each step with intention, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. As time passed, the tension between Lisa and me began to ease, though it still felt like we were walking on a tightrope. I had been dating casually, exploring connections without any real commitment, and it felt liberating. I was rediscovering parts of myself that I hadn't realized I'd lost, and it was exhilarating. One Saturday afternoon, I found myself sitting in my favorite cafe, enjoying a latte and reading a book. I sensed a change within me, an appreciation for the moment, for the simple pleasures of life. I had learned to savor these small victories, the ones that reminded me that I could still find joy outside. My tumultuous relationship with Lisa. That day, while I was lost in thought, I received a text from her. "Can we talk? I want to share something important." The message sent a wave of anxiety through me. I hadn't expected her to reach out like this, especially since we had been giving each other space. I took a deep breath and replied, "Sure, when and where?" We agreed to meet at the same cafe where we had shared so many conversations. Walking in, I felt a mix of anticipation and apprehension. Had she made progress with her therapy? Did she have news about her relationship with Ryan? When I arrived, Lisa was already seated, her hands nervously fidgeting with a napkin. As I approached, I could see the seriousness in her eyes. "Hey," she greeted me softly. "Hey," I replied, taking a seat across from her. "I've been thinking a lot about our progress, where we stand," she began, biting her lip as she gathered her thoughts. "I know I've made mistakes, but I want to be honest about how I feel. I've realized that I've been trying to hold onto you and our past without really understanding what that means for my future." My heart raced as I listened closely. "Go on," I encouraged. "What I mean is, I've been doing the work and I've learned a lot about myself. I don't want to live in the shadow of my mistakes anymore. I don't want to cling to a relationship based on guilt or loss." She continued, her voice steadying. "I think it's time for both of us to embrace the possibility of moving forward, even if that means apart." The words hung in the air between us, heavy yet liberating. I felt a mixture of relief and sorrow. "Are you saying you want to end things?" I asked, searching her face for clarity. "Not necessarily end things, but I think we need to step back and evaluate what we truly want. I want you to be happy, and I want to be happy too. I want to explore what life looks like for us as individuals before we can even think about being together again," she explained. I took a moment to process her words. "I agree. I think we've both been so focused on what we lost that we forgot to consider what we want moving forward." I felt a spark of hope. I've been exploring new connections, and while it hasn't always been easy, I'm learning what it means to pursue happiness. Lisa nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "I'm proud of you for that. It takes courage to move forward, especially after everything we've been through." We spent the next hour talking openly and honestly about our feelings, our goals, and what we wanted for our future. It felt like a weight had been lifted. While the conversation was bittersweet, it was also a step toward mutual understanding. We both acknowledged that we may not end up together, but that didn't diminish the love we once shared. As we walked out of the cafe together, I felt a sense of closure. It wasn't an ending, but a new beginning. We hugged tightly, lingering for a moment as if to encapsulate everything we'd been through, the joy, the pain, and the healing. The days that followed were filled with a newfound clarity. I focused on my career, my therapy, and my budding social life. I continued to date casually, allowing myself to explore new connections without the shadows of my past looming over me. Each new person I met reminded me that I was still capable of love, laughter, and companionship. As for Lisa, she also began to thrive outside of our relationship. I saw her take on new hobbies, forge new friendships, and take charge of her own life. We occasionally checked in on each other, sharing updates and supporting one another through our individual journeys. Months later, I found myself sitting in the same cafe, but this time it felt different. The weight of betrayal that once hung heavy in my heart had transformed into a sense of peace. I no longer grieved the relationship I had lost. Instead, I embraced the person I had become. In the end, this experience taught me invaluable lessons about love, trust, and resilience. I learned that healing is not linear, and it's okay to take time for myself. I also realized that sometimes love isn't enough to hold two people together. Sometimes, the healthiest choice is to allow each other the freedom to grow apart. As I closed my laptop and finished my coffee, I felt a sense of gratitude wash over me. I was ready for whatever life had in store for me next, whether that was finding love again or continuing to nurture my own growth. I had faced the storm, and I had come out stronger on the other side. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine, and that made all the difference.